And I'm back, and what I'm doing here today is I'm getting more things ready to get that 580 CK tractor on the go. One of the things here is I went in my storage and I dug out the power steering pump, and I had just had that off to fix this. I fixed it with JB Weld, and I'm going to put a coat of paint on this. But it was when this thing was laying in the bushes, you know, there was wet leaves that went down between here and the block, and it rusted a hole in the shell. And I know you can buy these things, but the ones I saw were, you know, over $100 just for the shell, you know, not the pump itself. So I think that'll work. I bought a new O-ring for here too. I got to make up a gasket where it mounts onto the block, so that's got to be cleaned up. The other thing I'm doing is I'm getting the intake manifold heater wired up. I found an old battery cable, and what I did was I used one end of it, and then I got these number 4 gauge crimps. So you just put them in here. I just stripped back the end of the cable and then crimped it in the vise. Yeah, so I ended up getting the 2 cables I needed out of one old battery cable. So that worked out pretty good. So yeah, I used the factory end on that one. I put that on there. And then I got this one crimped on both sides. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the oil bath together, that oil bath air filter. I got the housing for it in here. I'll show you that. So there, I got the main body of it there, and that's the membrane there. And basically this pan gets filled to a certain level with engine oil, and it clamps on there. And intake air, there's a vacuum created here by the engine. That's the intake for the air, and the air comes in from the outside here, goes through, and it has to pass down to the bottom of the pan and then bubble up through that oil, and that traps all the contaminants, just like a paper cartridge filter would do. And this is the old style way of doing it. So it's just an oil bath filter, and quite effective actually. Just change the oil every, you know, the same way you would change an air filter. Anyway, I'm going to put that together and get that on the engine. I've rooted through and dug up some old rust paint of mine. What else have I got on the go here? I'll show you the solenoid. Okay, so the solenoid that was on the tractor was shot, so I got a new solenoid here for this heated air intake. So it's 188 diesel. There's no glow plugs, but there is a heating element in the intake manifold here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, one of these cables is going to go here to the solenoid. The other one's going to go from the solenoid down to the positive terminal on the starter. Yeah, that's where you get your power from. That'll be power from the battery, comes over to the starter, and the same tap there on the starter brings power to one side of the solenoid. And there's your key switch here. Basically what I'm going to do is, instead of putting it on a toggle or something that might get left on, I was thinking of putting it on a momentary contact switch, but I don't happen to have one. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to wire it into the accessory position on the key switch. Now this key switch that I've got, it's got 4 positions. It's got battery, accessory, ignition, and start. Okay, so what I've done is I've just taken a length, you know, I've got some random lengths here. The other ends aren't terminated yet, but I got a red one coming up to the battery, so that'll go right to the 12-volt terminal on the battery. The other red one I've got here is going to go down to the solenoid on the starter. Okay, there's an accessory position. I've used an orange wire for that. And the yellow wire is on the ignition side. So basically what will happen when you're in the run position, so anything that you want to have running with when the tractor's running, when the key's in the on position, it'll run on the yellow wire. And there's already a hole in the dashboard for this size of ignition. So I've got that. The other thing I've done since we last spoke, I hooked up the little line here for the oil pressure gauge. There's a fitting that goes into the block right there. Okay, oil pressure gauge up here. The other thing I did was I put in a pull stop for the injection pump here. All right, that's just a universal cable I put in here. Yeah, and you see that universal cable, I ran it in there, and I ran it through the keeper there on the end of this pivot here. Now I had a problem with that. It was frozen, it was rusty. So I had to put a torch on that little pivot down there yesterday, and I got that freed up. I got the cable working well. So basically that's the running position, and you pull it to stop the engine right there. Okay, so that's working well. Yeah, so the other thing I had to do was I had to put a new end on the end of this rod for the injection pump. This is the throttle. So that's the slowest position there, and then that's the fastest position. Right? So that's controlled by both the lever on the steering column and the foot pedals. Okay, and that I did a video about these linkages not a couple weeks ago. So if you want to look up there in the top of the video, you can see a link to the video I did showing how these rods all work for the throttle. Okay, so I got that working. The other thing I've done is I got a battery. It's a used battery, but it's got a good charge in it. I found a place on here to connect to ground, so I cleaned that up, and I think this will work for engine ground here on the frame. And then I've got a positive cable that I made up. I showed that in the last video. And what I've done is I've just taken a piece of 5/8 heater hose and run it through the hose, because it runs on a sort of a tortuous route up through here, and there's a lot of places where it could be, you know, get abraded and stuff like that. So there's a lot of chance for abrasion and stuff up through here, that especially once the power steering unit goes in here and the hoses and whatever else. So I just thought I would protect it a bit by putting it inside of a piece of heater hose. Okay, so that's coming along. I am going to eventually fix the hole down for the battery here. That little rod there, it'll just come across the side of the battery there. I'm going to clean that up a bit. Don't want that bouncing around, but yeah, very close on that. Oh yeah, I got see, this is the well, like sort of a drain well on the bottom of the fuel tank. And usually you have a caulk on there, like to drain it out. But for now, I'm just going to put a plug in there. That way I can use it. Eventually I'll get a drain for there. All the lines are hooked up on the fuel tank. That's the return. I put a new piece of copper last fall to the filters. And like I said, there's new filters. Primary and secondary fuel filter in here. Engine oil change has been done. A new engine oil filter. And like I said, I haven't done anything with the injection pump. We're going to just try it the way it is. If it goes, fine. If it doesn't, it means it's, you know, it's going to have to come apart and be cleaned up. And I've got a little kit for that. You guys have put kits in these Rusamaster injection pumps, these rotary pumps, and I haven't done one, but by all accounts, you know, it can be done. Just, but you know, you don't have to take it to a specialty shop to get these done usually, if you're careful. And like I say, I explained in the other video, I had the rad checked at a shop, and they soldered some holes in it last fall. I got a new pulley on the water pump, and some new hoses, top and bottom. And I bypassed the, see now there's two pumps on this for hydraulic. There's one down in here that feeds the hydraulics for the clutches that drives the tractor. So the clutch is down in here. And so there's hydraulic clutch, and there's the shifter for that here, the bypass valve. Or normally that hydraulic fluid gets cooled on the front. There's a cooler in front of the radiator. But I don't have that hooked up, so I just bypassed it here for now. So, you know, I'm not going to run it a lot, just to test it. So that's bypassed for now. And the other hydraulic system is, there's a pump that goes on here, and I have the pump. I took it off, and it drives from the end of the crankshaft there. So this pump that goes on here, that's the main hydraulic pump for all the rams and for the backhoe and for the bucket. And that's not necessary right now just to test the engine, but I do have it, and I can put it in. I'll show you that when it goes in. And yeah, that's driven directly off the front of the crankshaft there. Okay, so what I've got done is I've used some of this automotive tubing here to put the wires in. So I've done it the other way. I'll show you that in a second, but this is the power for the ignition switch. So it comes to the positive on the battery. So I brought that down, and I put it through a fuse holder here. Got a 15 amp fuse in there. And the other thing I've done is just put an eye on the end of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the eye, that'll fit on here on the terminal when I bolt that down. So over here on this side at the solenoid, I've got this wired up. And how this is done is this little orange wire here comes from the ignition switch from the accessory position. So when I go into accessory position, it'll energize this solenoid. It'll go to ground through this other orange wire going back to the base right here to the screw. what that'll do is it'll close the contacts that joins this lead here that comes up from the positive on the battery to the intake manifold heater. Now on this 580CK, the 188 engine doesn't have glow plugs, so it's all it has is an intake manifold heater, and that's how that'll work. So I'll go to the accessory position on the key for 20 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever I choose, and then when I go to start it, this becomes de-energized because it's only going to run on the accessory position on the key. That's how I did it for now. I can change that later, but that'll work for now. And the other lead that comes out of there is the one to the starter, and that goes down, and that comes to here and does the same thing. That'll energize the solenoid in here, joining the hot lead from the battery to this other lead that runs the motor. So the one lead I have left over from the ignition switch is actually the one that's marked ignition. So if this was a gasoline engine, this would go to the coil, this would energize the coil, or this would energize the spark system, and it would keep it running because it's wired to the run position of the key switch, and so it would basically keep the ignition firing so long as it's in the run position. Now this is a diesel engine, so there's no need for that, but what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to run anything that I want to have running when the tractor is when the engine's going. So if that's lights or anything like that, and that's probably a good way to do it, because if you have lights rigged up on the accessory position or just straight to power on a switch, you could leave them on and kill the battery. So if the engine's running, the lights will be on, probably, like a couple of interior lights or maybe a spotlight or something like that. And if if the key switch is off, then this wire will be de-energized. And there's the key switch there we put in the other day. I've got to tighten this a little bit. So we're getting closer. Okay, so I'm just going to hook up this battery to try all that and see if it works. What I've done was with this eye is I put it on the head end of the bolt so that when I turn the nut to tighten it, it's not going to turn against that eye. That'll just pull it tighter. Okay, that's plenty snug for now. Okay, negative on there now. All right, now let's give that a try. Okay, so the key switch is all wired up. All right, so it's all rigged up. First thing we're going to do is we're going to see if this solenoid works. Okay, accessory position. I heard that click. That should be getting warm. Okay, you can hear it click here when I turn the key to accessory. And that is indeed getting warmer. Yeah. Okay, so that's working. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to try the starter and see if it goes. Now, the engine's not, there's no fuel in the tank yet, but I just want to try the starter and see if the starter is going to engage with the key. Here we go. And what I just finished doing was barring it over by hand. Ah, that sounds promising. The reason the fan's not turning is there's no belt on it yet. But yeah, that sounds promising. The starter's working good. It's cranking the engine over. We're getting closer and closer all the time. Got to make things pretty. If things are pretty, it's going to work, right? It's got to be pretty. Okay, I'm also going to paint. This is the oil bath breather. So that needs a coat of paint too. I got that all wiped off. So that is going to be yellow. It was already yellow at one point in its life, I think, but it's going to be a little yellower when I'm done with it. Okay. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you again here real soon on Everyday Projects. Bye for now.